Hi, my name is Bill Lokey,
And I'm Laurie Lokey.
and we're here to talk to you today about relationships. Sometimes in our relationships there's a lot of complication, and it's not always easy. But when we get stuck, when we really get in this stuck place, there oftentimes feels like there's no way out. We can't seem to get out of those difficult places very easily. We want to show you today where a lot of that comes from, where we get stuck, and then kind of how to at least begin to move out of that. And in our relationships, some of you may be married, some of you may be in a committed relationship, and even if you're not, this is still really important to understand about yourself, because that's what happens and where we come from in relationships is there's got to be two people, individuals, that come together in a marriage.
And of course, to do the same thing over and over again is insanity, right? So we want to show you how we can get stuck in certain places of trauma. We can get stuck in certain patterns of relationships and friendships. We can get stuck in our codependency. And we want to give you some tools on how to move into a place of authenticity, of vulnerability, of being yourself, me showing up with my me, in relationship with your me, with honor and respect and dignity. Yeah. But first, what happens is we've got to go back. We've got to go back in the story to the original relationship, the mother-father-child relationship. And some of you may be adopted. Some of you may have had a healthy home, a mother and father present. Some of you may have had a present mother but an absent father, or a present father and an absent mother. There are a lot of different families in this world today. And so what I want to do is take you back to the place of attachment. Attachment is where the mother has the baby looks at the mother looks at the baby, there's that left eye to left eye attachment, there's safety, there's emotional attunement, there's connection, and that baby knows that all is well with the world. That baby can have their emotions, they can have their feelings, and the mother can contain them. And yet, there are sometimes the baby comes into the world and the mother is there, but she is so distracted with all the crazy things in the world that she cannot look at that baby because she has got too much going on. And so that baby looks longing, hungering for love, hungering for acceptance, hungering for a place of safety. Or maybe that baby is in their mother's arms, and the mother is just so emotionally distraught that she looks to the baby to take care of her. She looks to the baby to be the one that's going to make her life okay. And in that relationship, the baby's just like, oh no, it's too much, because that child was never meant to be the parent. That child then is falsely empowered. It is what we would call more in the avoidant attachment, where that child is actually being abandoned by not having the mother take care of him and her. So imagine all those different attachment styles that come, and they grow up into an adult. They have all these different roles. They have all these different lies that may have been put onto them, or rules that they believe are true. And I call that all their baggage, and they come and they bring it into the relationship.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Here we are.
And one of the things that's really important to know, even biologically, is when a child has, even in that first year of life, very early part of life, when that child has a parent who is looking at them some of the time, but responding to them, giving them that nurture that she's talking about, what we know is that actually helps to develop some of the dopamine receptors in the brain. So interestingly enough, that when a child doesn't get that kind of nurture and reflection back and an attunement, so that there's secure attachment, what happens is you've got a child that grows up to be an adult looking for dopamine. Dopamine is that brain chemical that's about kind of feeling good. And so some of you may even find that it almost feels like biologically you've got this tendency toward addiction or towards things that just help me to feel good rather than just having that a part of your own brain that works normally. And so even to our own on a cellular level, this stuff really matters in how it impacts us. And so we want to continue to show then in growing up in this home where this child has a mother or a father or caregivers or both that really care about them and bring them some secure attachment, it can make a really big difference. However, regardless of what happens, there's still going to be complications in this marriage thing.
Right. Because everybody gets too much of something or not enough, because we are in an imperfect world. What we have is a child that has emotional attunement. There's safety, love, and trust. There's a place where they can have their emotions, they can be vulnerable, they can have their feelings, they can come to mom and dad and know that everything is okay in the world. And they're not living in a place of uncertainty. They're going, mom and dad got this. They have it. And I believe as parents, that's our role, is that we continue to create that safety for our children. Yet there's a problem, because everyone has experienced too much of something or not enough. And we get these messages in our head. Either we have the inner critic that tells us we're stupid or there's something wrong with us, not to show up, or we have the place where we avoid and we wall off and we keep people out of the relationship. And what I call that is drama trauma. And because anytime you're acting in a survival system, there's going to be drama and there's going to be trauma. And so Cartman created an incredible triangle called the Cartman's Triangle. The only difference in this triangle is I changed his word a persecutor to perpetrator, because in my story, I would have so much shame, so much toxic shame. I would perpetrate myself. I would tell myself how awful I was or how stupid I was. And so Bill and I are going to demonstrate what that looks like in relationship.
Yeah. So in this, you first have to understand how this is a triangle, because each of us dances on this triangle. When you and I have had some sort of wounds where we've been hurt, this is the place where we go as humans to try to survive, to try to defend ourselves, to try to stay safe. This isn't about who we really are. These are things that we begin to do, roles we take on to try to stay safe, emotionally in our relationship.
And they feel true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the crazy thing. I would be thinking that I had every right to feel this way, and I would escalate in my emotions, and I'd feel the energy going up my arms, and I'd be like, I am right and you're wrong. Yeah. And he would go, you're right and I'm wrong. And I always say 2 rights make a divorce, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to understand what the lies are on this triangle to be able to move off into a healthy relationship.
Yeah. So this is about reacting. So again, in my family growing up, as I'd said earlier, we had a family that looked really good, and most of the time we were good, but there were times when I found myself trying to get somebody else to feel better. If one of my parents, if my mom got angry or upset about something, I found myself trying to see if I could get her to not be angry or not be upset when that would happen. Sometimes it was about being funny. Sometimes it was about just trying to be loving and to say the right thing. But it was a way, in a sense, of rescuing her from her feelings so everything could kind of settle down. Now, there were many other times when things were great with my mom. I think it was that normal reaction where a parent becomes overly tired or whatever the case may be. Not only, though, was I rescuing my mom from her feelings, But I was really rescuing me from my anxiety. So you've got to understand that's where this comes from. It's not just about somebody else, but it's actually about rescuing me from my feelings. Now, when I learned to do that growing up as a child, then I grow up as an adult thinking, oh, that must be about where I get a lot of my meaning in life, is to kind of, if I see someone having feelings that seem to be distressful, is to do something to try to get them to feel okay. If I hadn't gotten into my own recovery before I became a therapist, I could have screwed up a lot of people in their lives by just going, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. Now, when I met her, I already had this kind of role of still of like, okay, I can rescue people and make things be okay.
And I had a PhD in victimology. Now, I know that's not a word, but I do hope it will be a word someday in the dictionary. And all I knew was being a victim. Poor, pitiful me. What I didn't realize is how much my victimhood had gone back into my childhood. I had an eating disorder from the time I was 12 years old, moved into this terrible place of shame, didn't even know a name for it back in that day until later, and thank goodness there's a lot of recovery around eating disorders. But I only knew being a victim, and I came looking for somebody to rescue me.
And then, of course, when I saw this person who looked like they kind of needed to feel better, to rescue, man, I just jumped right into my rescue role. One of my heroes when I was growing up, of course, was Superman.
Of course.
And so it was like, if I can just kind of fly in here, save her, it's going to make me feel really good about myself, but hopefully that's going to make her really like me, and that's going to kind of solve everything. The problem is when I'm doing that, this is not about love. This is about trying to remember to make my anxiety to go down. So it's really about manipulation. It's about controlling her. And did you like the feeling of being controlled?
I didn't like the feeling of being controlled, and so I went and did some really deep recovery work and worked really hard, and then realized that being a victim was not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be able to live in my authentic self. And so later in the relationship, when he wanted to control me, I got mad.
Yeah, and so
said,
then sometimes
no.
she would run from here to step over onto this card, which was then the anger would come out as like, you're not going to control me. You're not going to be that kind of person. I don't want that kind of person in my life. Well, so what I did was I danced from here over, then I became in the victim place inside, a feeling like, oh gosh, you're right. I am, I do this. I'm sorry. I don't need to do that. I can't do anything right.
Well, then I don't like being mean. And so I would go back to rescue her and like, oh, it's okay. But you try this dance for a little bit and you get exhausted. And that's what we find a lot when we work with couples, is they're on this triangle dancing, doing the same thing over and over again, and they're tired.
And after she would be rescuer for a while, then of course she's going to be tired of that. Like, would you just kind of show up and be a real person? And so, yeah, this is a place where we can get stuck. As John Gottman calls it, we can get in gridlock in our relationships. And it really feels like there is kind of no way out of this thing.
And yet, if it's all you know from your childhood experience, how do you know what you don't know?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you're just going, isn't this the way I'm supposed to be? Isn't this the way I'm supposed to act? This is what I learned from my growing up.
And since this is really about survival, this is the limbic part of our brain, the fight, flight, or freeze. And when we're in the limbic part, we are reacting. It's not rational thinking. It's not what we really want to do. And so, as she says, when there's two rights, I'm right and I'm right, two rights make a divorce.
Right. And it's also the emotional intensity that can happen. It's like, I'm going to kill you emotionally before you kill me.
And of course, that's not physical.
No.
But what is going on is that when you feel angry enough or hurt enough or shamed by your spouse enough, you feel like finally what we do is we wind up saying something that really does hurt them, crush them, deep down inside and wound them in a way.
Right.
And when we do that, it's really hard to get over that. We can say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that the next day, but still inside your mind, you're also thinking, yeah, but you said that. And so we file it away and it stays as hurt. And that's how we continue to get stuck here, because the next time it happens again, then she may be thinking, see, he said this again. And now I'm even entrenched even more in my beliefs that this is who he is, or this is who she is, and we're never going to get beyond this.
Right. And John Gottman talks about this being gridlock.
Yeah. This is a place of gridlock, just like bad traffic. You just can't get out. And once you've realized that I don't think we're ever going to get out of this, then it really feels hopeless. What we want to say then is this is not the place where we have to stay stuck. There is a way off of this. However, the way off of this is a way of starting off becoming vulnerable and real about going, I don't want to do this anymore. But it takes getting off of this to go to a triangle that we believe is a really healthy place to live. But we have to have vulnerability, and we have to be a willingness of not just surviving anymore.
And we have to understand what that part of our brain does. We have to recognize that it's not normal, that there are reactions, and we have to understand how to self-regulate, to be able to come back online, as I call it, back into that prefrontal cortex, to be able to be grounded and centered, to take responsibility for my actions, to own what I do or what I don't do, and to be able to be vulnerable in it.
And interestingly, when we were talking about the first triangle, part of what parents do for a child when a child is really young is the parents are, in a sense, their external regulators. They help them to know, honey, you don't have to be that upset about, your shoe being untied while we're out on the sidewalk. Or you don't have to be that upset. And we don't fuss at them and yell at them. It's just learning that when a child looks to the parent, when the child thinks something is the end of the world, and the parent actually has a smile on their face, or they're going, honey, it's going to be okay. That's an external regulator for the child to go, okay, it's not the end of the world. And then later, once the child sees that enough, they learn to have their own internal regulation to be able to soothe themselves, to go, wait, this isn't the end of the world. I'm going to be able to get through this. So when we get to this part of the triangle, or this triangle, and if I've not had that ability from my parents, then it makes it even more difficult for me to be able to get off of this triangle and to not go, this is the end of the world, nothing's going to be any better. And it's hard to find that internal self-regulation. So what we want to do then is to show you then the third triangle, whereas in our work, in our recovery, there is a place where then we can begin to move to being very real, still feeling what we feel, but it's a place of not wounding each other over here. And that's
the third triangle.
The third triangle.
Right, which is having an adult self, an inner child, that place where there's laughter, play, and fun, where there's that place of being able to have your emotions, to be able to love all of you, even that little girl that maybe you didn't think that was likable, or that little boy, and to believe in the goodness of God. And for me, from my story, to understand that God was good was a street fight. To be able to get to that place of not shaking my fist and asking God why, in that victim place, of learning how much He delights in me and cherishes me, the freedom that gave to me to have an authentic self, to have a me that He created for His purpose and for His glory, and that He does have my back. He is with me. He will not ever leave nor forsake me, is how I learned to move from this part, this drama triangle, over to have an adult self taking responsibility for my actions and loving the person that God's creating. Sometimes, it doesn't mean I'm perfect. I have a lot of work to do. It just means I know who I am, and who I am, God delights in.
So if you'll notice, this triangle, when you see it, is actually an inverted triangle of this one. On this one, the mother and father are at the top. The child, of course, is at the bottom, because that's when we were a child. On this one, God then is in the role of mother and father. And then we don't just have a child part of us anymore. We've also got an adult on board. Mm-hmm. So now when we're talking about the inner child, we're not talking about something that's just very, I guess, just kind of made up. And some people I know don't like that term. Right. But what we're talking about really is just that you have memories of being a child. At least most of you do. We also know that when we were a kid, we had things that we felt that were really vulnerable because as a child, we were vulnerable. And so a part of the healthy self is knowing that I still feel things that feel vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I still feel hurt. I still feel sad in a vulnerable way. I can still feel guilt and shame sometimes. And when I do, that vulnerability then helps me to not try to move over here and protect myself to go like, nope, I'm not letting anybody see me. It's having that, yeah, sometimes I'm really scared, which is very true. But I've also got an adult self that's on board. As all we like to say, an adult who's driving the bus, who's not the one that the child is not making all my decisions for me, but instead I get to be influenced by what I feel, knowing that I'm vulnerable, but I also get to make decisions as an adult that are much more mature. Now, sometimes as a healthy person, we can allow that to be very integrated, to be that we can be an adult and we can act in adult ways, but we can also be very aware of our child part, of our feelings, but also sometimes wanting to be playful. And sometimes I think some of the people I like the best in this world are those that really let those mix well. One of the things, I haven't told this story before when we were doing this, but when Laurie and I got married, there was a point in the ceremony when I started singing a song, and she didn't know about that.
He surprised me.
And I was terrified that I wasn't going to remember the words to the song. And so as I started singing it, because it was a surprise to her, she did this thing, which she sometimes does, and she slugs me in the arm right in front of the wedding ceremony. Well, everybody starts laughing. Well, it caused me to relax so that I could remember the words to the song. But that's a part of what I really like about her, is that ability to be an adult, but also to have that kid part of you that can play. And then when we have both of those parts of ourselves, we also know that there's plenty of times when we're going, and God, sometimes I don't have a clue what to do. And that's where there's got to be this place in our life where we go, I've got to have something bigger than me. And part of our faith is that's God, that this God who loves me, but also is so much bigger and so much wiser, than we can look to and gain wisdom, gain trust in trusting God. And so even some of the place in Scripture talks about coming to God like a little child, but also we come with trust, learning how to trust Him in being an adult, so that we take that growth that we have from God and try to live in a really mature way.
And just when he was sharing, it made me think of a story when we were actually on the Drama Trauma Triangle, and he's on the front porch going, what do I do with this woman? And I'm in my bed crying, and he says he argued with God for about 30 minutes about this, but he was praying, and the Lord told him to come and hold me. And so he comes in the door sheepishly and says, the Lord said for me to come and hold you. Well, I can't argue with God, okay? And so he comes in.
And I wasn't sure what she was going to say to that. Anyway.
Yeah, and he comes in and holds me, which was this place of learning it at my worst, that this man could come and hold me. And that actually happened not one time, but several times, where he would, the Lord would say, one time we were back to back, and the Lord said, go rub her back. He didn't even know my back was hurting. And it were those kind of things where we went and we began to rest in God helping us in this relationship to learn how to love each other well.
So for some of you, I don't know if you may think, oh, okay, wait a minute, I'm not hearing God all the time. Well, we don't either. This is not about hearing someone audibly talk to us in our room, but it's learning more and more, how do I be in touch with God? And God has said, and our beliefs is that God has said that the Holy Spirit would come and be in us, a part of His Spirit. And so it's becoming more and more in tune with, how do I listen to God's Spirit to teach me how to love well? Because I'm telling you, without that, I don't love well. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and that has been hurtful to some people. But as we continue in this place where we can say, God, how do I love well right now? And when we begin to hear that and begin to hear inside that what feels congruent with what love looks like, then how do I begin to step into that and act on that? And when we do, then we're not just trying to survive. I'm not doing something that hurts her or that she's doing something that hurts me, but instead I'm looking at, I still maybe need to step into something and bring up conflict and talk about it if there's conflict involved. Mm-hmm. But how do we love each other well? How do I love her well? And that's a very different place, so that then we can continue to help heal each other in the way that we get loved, rather than just trying to make sure that we're right.
And knowing that we're known and loved no matter what, that God delights in us. It's not even just about our relationship, it's about all relationships. How can we walk in humility, in the fullness of being the person God's created you to be able to love others well, to love your spouse well? I don't have to be right anymore. I don't have to say, it's all about me. No, because I'm already known and I'm already delighted in. So I can stand in the confidence and in humility that I don't have to fight. That doesn't mean that I'm perfect, because there are times that somebody hurts one of my loved ones. That fighter's going to come up. I'm going to have to get her back in the ring, to have God, be the one in control. But I want to continue. This is a daily practice of knowing that I'm known, I'm loved, I'm delighted in. Therefore, I can show up in my vulnerability, in my weakness, and say, I'm sorry. I was overreacting there, and I should have not said that, and I'm sorry.
And the cool thing about being in this place is that instead of having to be right, we can begin to relax a little bit inside to start recognizing. One more story, at least that I'm aware of. There was a day that early on in our marriage, we were having an argument about something, and I knew any moment she was going to realize something I said and go, oh, you're right, I've been wrong all this time. I just knew that was going to happen. So we kind of kept doing this thing back and forth, and there was this moment that she said something that it was like, wait, this rings familiar. I think someone has said this to me before. And suddenly there was this moment I thought, wait, is this me that's been making this big deal out of this thing in our marriage? Is it actually me and not her? And literally there was this flip that I realized, oh my gosh, this is me that's been doing this. It's kind of, in a sense, turning this around on her. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I have done this most of my life, and for the first time recognized it. And I'm like, why didn't I recognize this earlier? And I don't know the answer to that, but all I know is that trying to live this way, where I'm able to find more humility to say, wait a minute, I don't have to be right. Is this where I've been wrong all these years? It allows us to see that, to own it, and to step into repair. And one of the things we know about in relationships, whether it's in a marriage or any other relationship, it's not so much the rip as it is the repair. And the repair can do so much healing.
And what I know is that anytime I want to point the finger at somebody else, I've got 3 fingers pointing back at me. And it usually is a sign that there's some more work I have to do within myself, because it's not really about them. It's about my heart. It's about the things that need to change, the things that I need to grow in to be able to love well.
So we hope that some of these things today will be helpful in your life, whether it be in a primary relationship, a marriage, or with a work relationship or friendship or family. We hope that some of these things might be helpful for you.
That's right. Let's go change the world.
Cool.